And I think it's something that, when we think about the circuitry really, and how the information is carried throughout the body, it's important to come back to and simplify it, to recognize that surely there's a connection there. And something that you said to me that really stuck with me, um, that was I continue to find really interesting and fascinating, is when we were talking about one particular injury that was very high profile a few years back, and people were struggling to figure out why this individual was continuing to have these problems after doing every different kind of available set of imaging and diagnostics. It took having more of a functional X-ray look at the upper cervical spine in order to better understand where that challenge was coming. Why don't you help us? I'm sure I didn't do a very good job explaining that, but why don't you explain for the audience there why imaging may be missing the boat here in some cases, for people that present with these challenges?
The biggest reason that the imaging is not showing evidence of pathology is because the imaging is being conducted in neutral anatomic stationary positioning, which one can understand, okay, that makes logical sense, but really what's being assessed with that type of imaging is anatomy. So do you have 7 bones in your neck? Is there a fracture? Is there a dislocation? Is there signs of arthritis? And if you either have a minimal amount of that, they'll comment on it. Or if you don't have anything, they'll comment on it as being normal. And when you're dealing with like I said, a dynamic region, you want to be able to try to assess it dynamically. And for example, a simple example is when a patient says to me, when I shoulder check the back out of a parking stall, I either get lightheaded during the process of looking back to make sure it's safe, or when I return back to neutral, I have this flush or this wave of lightheadedness that comes over me, and then it stabilizes in 15, 20 seconds. And so when other clinicians hear patients say that, it's in one ear and out the other ear, kind of like, well, whatever the reason is, it's not serious because it doesn't last. And in my mind, it's probably one of the most telling things that a person can tell me that signifies the likelihood that they have an unstable upper neck. Because the job of C1, C2, which is where the majority of these serious problems exist after injury, is a rotatory functional segment. And so when you position into a rotary position and you experience some sort of a neurological phenomenon, so this is not that they experience pain in that position, but that they get lightheaded or dizzy or nauseous. Mm-hmm. And it comes in a wave, or it subsides in a wave. And so this is something that tells me this person's neck needs to be assessed in those positions, and to be able to observe them going in and out of those positions in real time, to actually follow and see what the bones are doing with relation to each other as they undergo those movements. And this is something that is grossly missed when you statically position somebody in neutral anatomic position. And medicine needs to start, or this, at least physical functional medicine, needs to start assessing patients functionally. And that's what I've been focusing on for well over 20 years. And that's been, it's been proven time and time again in our clinics that this is the missing piece of information that finally allows these chronic patients to have closure and answers as to what has been ailing them for the longest time. Because they may not per se display pain as their primary symptom. They could have a gamut of what get termed as dysautonomic symptom patterns. And autonomic basically means that the body's baseline background rest and digest and fight and flight system is a background system, or 2 background systems that function without us consciously having to dictate anything that they do. And when you have these compressive forces at the brainstem, because the brainstem is the part of the spinal system, or the neural system that houses the nerves that make up this autonomic nervous system. So when you have these mild compressive forces of the brain on the brainstem, due to ligamentous laxity and instability of the vertebrae, that mild pressure ends up having an effect on these autonomic nerves, and a person will have a potential gamut of autonomic nerve dysfunction which they, in medicine term dysautonomia, or POTS is another good one, where they can't be upright because they'll, have heart palpitations and things like that. And they're chronically fatigued and sore everywhere. And so these are common things that all relate back to the brainstem. And so functional imaging is in my opinion, and been in my experience over thousands of scans, is the missing link in these patients.
Oh, it's so great.